Hi, everybody. It's Max Bretos, and welcome to the Soccer OG podcast on YouTube. What you're about to see and hear is an interview I did on a recent show with Brett Oppenheim, who you will know from Selling Sunset and Selling OC on Netflix. Brett, who has an incredible reach, has been approached by U.S. Soccer to help amplify and get the word out for our game, for our sport, for our country over this very important stretch from 2024 leading up to the World Cup in 2026. While I have you, a reminder to check out the Soccer OG podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can see the entire show with Brett and the entire library available, and of course here on YouTube under my name, Max Bretos. Let's get to the interview. We jump in here to the business end, and a gentleman I got the pleasure to meet during the U.S. men's national team game against Trinidad down there in Austin. Brett Oppenheim, many will know from Selling Sunset on Netflix and now Selling OC. I'm surprised I've got you for 2 minutes, Brett. You are the busiest man in Los Angeles, or SoCal, I should say.
No, not true, not true. Plus, man, I've run into you a few times. I'm totally honored to jump on your pod. I told you offline. I've been watching your pod for a couple of years now.
Well, let me tell you something about Brett, which was really overwhelming because we got these invites for the U.S. men's national team game. And I heard it from tactical manager Filippo, who I keep in touch with. And he said, "You're going to do this? You want to come down?" And I said, "Great." And he mentioned Brett mentioned for you to come in. And I was like, whoa. So it was very rewarding to hear that people are listening to my stuff there on YouTube. What has drawn you? I mean, because you obviously you listen to Filippo and 11 Yanks and Pete, the Give and Go. There's all these content providers starting from scratch, talking soccer. What was the lure for you? Because you obviously consume a lot of this.
I mean, originally, if you go back all the way to where my interest in, it's kind of a long road. At first, I guess in the late 90s, it was the women's team that I was following. That was maybe my absolute first inclination to follow soccer.
So the 99ers.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And then I would like, because I grew up in California. Like, I'm not somebody who, my parents weren't from Europe. I mean, I guess my family's from Europe back in the day, but I mean, I was born and raised in America. So a lot of people that I've met that are like kind of pretty big soccer fans, like their dad's Argentinian or their mom's Mexican, or they grew up in Germany and they moved here when they were 12 or something like that. My story was just, so I actually got a late start in soccer. I suppose I don't want to date myself, but I will. Like,
hey, you're on with the oldest guy in soccer, so feel free.
I was already 22, in 1999, and so I was like, I started following maybe like Ronaldinho and Messi back in like the early 2000s, and I watched maybe a couple Barcelona games, but I mean maybe like two in my whole childhood. So then I really started getting involved in 2006 when I was in Europe during the World Cup. Just
in Germany. Was that the 2000? No, that
at the World Cup. I was just in Europe, traveling through Europe, and the World Cup was going on, and just that alone. I didn't go to any games, but just watching that experience of just seeing an entire continent absolutely consumed with something like that in such an amazing and insane way. I'd never experienced anything like that. And I mean, I know some Americans are going to think, oh, well, I mean, I'm a big Super Bowl fan, and when my team's in the Super Bowl,
yeah, they ain't seen nothing.
It's not analogous, because I'd watched Super Bowls my whole life, and this experience in Europe was just like life changing for me. Honestly, I mean, life changing might be slightly dramatic, but at least in a sporting context, it's just life changing.
But you're a huge sports fan. You consume it. And look, I saw you at the LAFC playoff game. I follow you on Instagram. You were at F1. You were watching. Obviously, you travel a lot. So sports is a big part of your day to day.
Yeah. And I see, ironically, even at this age, I would say the last few years it's become a bigger part, with F1 and soccer being even more pronounced in my life. That I would say, because I'm just starting to get into F1 the last few years as well. Yeah, sports is, but I was always a huge football fan, the Raiders. So yeah, sports has been a pretty big part of my life.
So you were saying like your family, like your parents, all that, but they didn't really watch a lot of soccer?
None.
Well, I can relate to you.
None of my parents have ever watched a soccer game, except maybe I made them.
Look, all I do, soccer's my life. That's how I put food on the table. It's my life. And my dad, if I had if I had to put a gun to his head and ask him the difference between Man City and Man United, he'd go, "I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry, son. This is it. I'll kiss you goodbye, and we'll move on." He doesn't
Yeah,
know no, he doesn't know anything about sports. So,
yeah,
but I mean, the soccer thing is something I've kind of mined myself as you have. But I think that's a great approach, right? Because it's organic, and we we get the hook. No one's kind of told us how it is. We've seen it with our own eyes and said,
yeah.
"This is something I want to get into."
And I do think there's a lot of people like that, young, a lot younger than us that are just, like baseball is kind of the opposite. Like if you're not raised in a baseball family, your chances of becoming a baseball fan are probably pretty slim. I feel like soccer, most people that are becoming soccer fans in America now, um, their families don't know like ours, like shit about soccer.
Well, we got to create fans. I mean, that's a big job, right? Because we're
It is.
not passing it down from generations. This is really interesting, actually, to see how someone can we can bring that to them. What that's a big question, but how do we do that where we can find someone, say, take a look at this? We have soccer on TV all the time. What are things that you might that'll work for you? Or I mean, I could talk about it just obviously watching games, learning about it, even though it's pretty difficult to learn if you don't know what's going on because it's pretty convoluted. I mean, you got Champions
It,
League. That's
it's
a big question. People
incredibly
don't know the
convoluted.
difference.
It's incredibly convoluted, which is
We're screwed. We're
awesome.
never gonna.
I think it's great. Like my favorite thing about soccer, by far, like there's no close second place, is its international nature, and that's what makes it complicated. But that's what makes it, the world's game. And to me, that's what makes it the best sport. Is like how international it is.
Me too. I agree with you. And when I was doing it,
Is that
learn.
your main? Like, if you had to rank the aspects of soccer, why that's your favorite sport, you'd say the international nature.
Yeah,
Of,
because when I was getting into it and like I would learn, I was a clean slate, and then we were at Fox and we'd start doing German Bundesliga, and we would talk about these teams. I go, why is it called Schalke 04? And I'm curious, and I'd learn about this and the town that it's in, and then you'd see the supporters. And I think the thing coming in clean on a historical side of it, and why this team hates this team, and why this rivalry is important, and what playing within this tournament and beyond, even though it was a lot of work, that was the lure for me.
and the World Cup, to me, is the real the best aspect of the international nature of soccer. Just the fact that like all these countries play each other, and it's all those countries are all consumed with that game. I mean, completely consumed. Like, I mean, I think Ghana, like, I think a lot of countries like have national holidays when they have these games. I mean, it's
Stop
just
what they're doing.
such a cool way to like relate to another country and relate to the people in your own country through
So
sport. I don't think any other sport does it that way.
that's the launch point. The World Cup, it has to be it, and anything that falls off of it, for at least looking from a U.S. perspective, is how we can get excited about. That's got to be it. And I think people knew that, and we have a big one in 2026. Um,
That's an understatement. Yeah.
we have, but that scares me, Brett, because everyone's like, "This is going to be huge." We got to get it right though, because it's that opportunity may not come. We'll probably get a World Cup in another 20 years.
Yeah.
But it feels like, okay, it's here. And every day we get closer and go, we're doing all the right things to seize that opportunity. We have a Copa America here. There's another thing. I worry that maybe we're not doing everything that is required, but I mean, that's just me being a little
There's
paranoid.
no way we'll do everything
Yeah.
that's that we should be doing, but I think we're going to do a hell of a lot better than we would have done if this World Cup was coming even 4 years ago,
Yeah.
certainly 12 years ago. I think we're finally prepped to do a really good job.
So you're working for US Soccer. You were doing or you're like an ambassador. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've talked to JT a few times, and there might be there's a lot of things that I put on the table that I want to do. I don't know how realistic all of them are.
But you got
And
their ear.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I've talked to, gotten to know everyone there. And I think there's probably some things I'll be able to execute on for sure. At a minimum, yeah, I have a good relationship with a lot of people there, but potentially more than that.
Well, that's unprecedented because U.S. soccer has been very guarded. Just me personally, when I heard about this, because bringing in some of the YouTubers that are openly critical of U.S. soccer to that game, I was like, that's kind of a eureka moment. I critical U.S. soccer, but I'm kind of like in the middle there. But it tells me that they're ready to kind of expand. Do you think they're in a position to open up a little bit?
Well, I can say that U.S. soccer, see, I wasn't involved, obviously, or didn't really know the people at U.S. soccer, but I've heard a lot about what U.S. soccer has been like over the last 20 years. I mean, over 100 years, really. And the CEO and a lot of the executives are all new. I mean, like the entire, basically, C-suite, let's call it, of U.S. soccer is new
That's a great
and
point.
younger. And I mean, dare I say, like, because I don't know the people that were there before them, but I would imagine they're like much more business minded and much more intelligent. I shouldn't say that, but I
Well,
mean, I would be shocked if the old regime was as impressive as this regime in my mind.
and it's probably because they're being a little more thorough about it. They have more positions. They're looking outward for help, and I think
Commission
that's
rights back.
yeah with
Yeah,
the sporting director.
there's so many things that have changed. I don't know exactly. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I would say JT has a lot to do with it. I would say if there's like if I had to put something at the top of the pyramid as to what's changing, it would be JT's involvement because he's made a lot of the hiring decisions. He's brought a lot of people from Stanford that are JT's what I would call almost overqualified, and so are some of the people he's brought in. And by overqualified, I mean they could make if a lot more, if not multiples more, in the I would call it the private sector if they didn't weren't working for a nonprofit and they went to like a private sector job, they could be making a lot more. So these people are sacrificing money because of the love of the sport and the desire for the same reason that I want to work with US soccer. And so when you start finding people like that, and then he starts finding more people like that, there's a lot of people at US soccer now in the C-suite level that could make a lot more in the private sector, and these are impressive people.
So he reached out to you, but he's reached out to a lot of folks, and it's he
I
kind
actually
of
reached
a
out well, no, other execs at US Soccer got me in touch with him. I wouldn't say he reached out, but
okay, but he was open to hearing about
absolutely, 100%. We spent a
and
lot of time together. Yeah,
and you've committed a lot of your time
yeah,
to be able to see what everyone else could do and some new people. I just think that's very rare from what I've known about U.S. soccer. They'll say this is how we do it. It was kind of like a ma and pa shop, and
Mhm.
we were growing, so I think that's expected because the sports is so small here, and now it's starting to burst at the seams with the players, um, the coverage, obviously our league here in Major League Soccer, and that's kind of a new step. So I mean, with just what would you like to see? What are some of the things that you would like to do to see the exposure grow a bit? I mean, where can we go?
Yeah,
Because you've had so much success on the TV, the streaming side, the TV side, to if you had a chance to promote U.S. soccer, what were some things that you would
I mean, some of this is just
prioritize?
stuff I've talked to JT about and told him that I wanted to do, and I don't know if I want to disclose all of it, but
Fair enough.
there's definitely some things that I would do. I would increase their social media presence. I would start a podcast. I would, there's about a list of like 10 things that I want to do. And some of them may be more realistic than others, some of them for budgetary purposes or what have you, or for political purposes. I don't know. We'll see. But there's a lot of things, but this is the first time that I would say US soccer is up to the task. Whether that, and I don't mean that just that they're necessarily going to agree with everything I say, but I think they're up to the task in the sense that like they're aware of the moment and they have the like intellectual power now where it needs to be to like execute on what needs to be done. And I would say that it might be, and they're not a mom and pop shop anymore. I think that they're treating it more like a business, but also like I think finally an organization that has the task of promoting soccer in the United States is such a big task, and I feel like for the first time they're up to that challenge. And that's not to say they won't be even better in 10 years, but I think they're miles from where they were even 2 or 3 years ago.
And I
Miles.
and just the hastiness of the World Cup, I think we have to give them time. And I think that's so encouraging to hear that this is something they'll build off. And we've seen that development. And even your point about having a bigger social media presence, you think that's a no-brainer, but that's something they haven't really had.
I mean, it's so weird because they're transitioning so much, which is why I'm like interested now in getting more involved because there's people like JT and their mindset has changed, but they have changed so much in the last like 2 or 3 years from what I've seen and heard. Um, so not they haven't they haven't changed everything they want to change. Like, for example, like there's just still a lot of things that are run the way it used to be run for
Of course.
100 years. We're talking over 100. I don't know how old it is. It's like 100 years old. So you can imagine, 98, 99 years of something running a certain way. So they're adapting as quick as they can. And that's why I'm saying, like, in 5 years, they're going to be a much smoother, larger, and even more impressive organization than they are now. So, 2026, they have a chance of executing maybe 70% of what should be executed. I don't know, 80%. Versus like maybe the 20% they would have had if they didn't make any changes in the last couple of years. But are they going to be like full steam ahead? No, because they started this like a year or two ago. If they had started 5 years ago, maybe they'd be full steam ahead right now. I don't think they're full steam ahead, but I feel like they have the pieces of the puzzle in place at least.
I am fine with that because a lot of times they'd say this is the way we do it, but it clearly that's changed and they're accepted. But you can't expect 0 to 60 in half a second. But they
Yeah.
are they realize what could be ahead of them with what they have, and I'll give them all the time as long as you see that progress. And I think you've
And getting
certainly
the
seen that.
commercial rights back was huge. They're crushing on that front. I think they're starting to crush on fundraising, and I just think they're really like, oh, and the NTC. I mean, the training center in Atlanta, that's game changing,
Yeah.
and just kind of got that off the ground. So I mean, not literally, it's not off the ground yet, but they have the ground. So I mean, that's massive. That's literally massive. We're talking $250 million, like, forever investment. That'll be the cornerstone of that organization. There's just so much happening right now at US Soccer that's exciting. That's the only reason I'm even, interested in. I would never put that much time and passion into an organization where I didn't see an open-mindedness and the intellectual capabilities to execute on everything that I wanted to. And so if I wasn't as impressed with them, I wouldn't be putting in the time, man. Like, I got, a lot going on. I love soccer, but I wouldn't be like, I'm not just banging my head against the wall. And I don't feel like it's banging my head against the wall with them.
That's awesome to hear because again, that's what I think about is that you've got a lot out on your plate. So for you to spend some time there, obviously it's a very important a labor of love, but obviously something that you feel has potential. You're getting me hyped, Brett. But what hypes you about this national team? And we see one of the big things is following the players. And that's kind of new, seeing how they're doing in Europe. Everyone wants to do it. You go to social media, everyone's tracking Gio Reyna and Christian Pulisic, and it's been fantastic, the guys at PSV. But on the field, what are some of the things that have caught your eye?
On the men's team, like, as far
Yeah.
as players or what?
Yeah, as far as players or developments or what's on the horizon, I know we have the Copa America, and certainly
Oh, I mean,
24, the Nations League.
this is the best 3 years probably to be a soccer fan, and I mean, the history of America. Possibly, it sounds like an overstatement, but
It
I mean,
doesn't because there was nothing really. This was hiding in the shadows so long.
yeah, no, I mean, so like now's the time, and the team. I mean, kind of similar with actually the team in some ways, the men's team and now the women's team. It's somewhat similar to every comment that I made about U.S. soccer. There's a lot of parallels. It's a whole new generation of talent. It's a type of talent that we've never seen before. They're young and they don't have like their complete footing. They're not in their prime yet. So I mean, the analogies to what I just said about U.S. soccer are actually very consistent. But it's as exciting as it could possibly be because we have essentially the entire team now in Europe, and I'm talking like even all the 26-man roster, not just the starting 11. And I would say the starting 11 now, most of them. I mean, there'll be a point in the near future where the starting 11 are all starting on pretty top tier teams, at least mid-table teams in the top 5 leagues. I mean, that's just like, if you had told me that a few years ago, come on, like I wouldn't even been able to be convinced of that 5 years ago.
What do you think about MLS? I know that's like kind of a bridge to there, and I saw you at some playoff game. We know LAFC is great, and that's a local club, but how long have
Yeah,
you kind of kept
Galaxy and
tabs?
MLS. I'm getting more and more involved with MLS. I'm more and more of a fan, especially the LA teams. I have friends on the LAFC and friends on the Galaxy, which I know is weird and stupid. So like you're supposed to pick.
They're like 10 miles apart. It should be okay. I get the same
Well,
feeling sometimes where it's like, don't look over there. I go, I know those guys. I spent a lot of
yeah,
time down there.
it's tough, but I mean, I grew up like I said, a Raiders fan, and the thought of being like a Raiders and 49ers fan was stupid. Like nobody would do that. So that's why I feel stupid saying I'm a Galaxy and LAFC fan. But I am. So, is what it is.
One day you're gonna have to make that big, tough decision. You're gonna
I
have to
know. I'm
be.
waiting for like
We're not there yet as a league, though. You don't really. There's
I'm
not.
waiting for my friends to like leave one of those two teams, and then I'll be like, okay, I'm all in on this team. But how can you do that when I don't even post, bro, when I'm like at LAFC games because I don't want to piss my friends off at the Galaxy. I mean, seriously, I don't think I storied or posted that game, even though, it was an epic game. I just don't want to like piss people off. So it's a weird place for me to be, but whatever.
I want to circle back as you mentioned the women's team, and obviously they had that World Cup, and your participation in U.S. soccer involves them. And this was a step back for a national team that was going full bore ahead. This is it's an interesting time for them because they have to reset a few things. They got a new coach, and that kind of plays in part to what you were saying that they did a big search, didn't mind their nickel and dime it or anything. They went after the best candidate and got it. Uh, I worry sometimes that they may not be able to reach that because the rest of the world reached that level they were at because the rest of the world's gotten so much better. How's your confidence about where they can bounce back in the next year or two?
I mean, I don't think anyone can be confident that we can dominate on the world stage the way we used to. It's just because the world has gotten so much better, So that shouldn't be the standard. But can we be in a position to win the World Cup in 2027? 100%. Our young talent, and I mean like really young, like 18 to 22 on that team is like maybe is better than ever. So yeah, I mean, I think, and from what I understand, Emma is one of, if not the best female coach, in the world. Um, and by female, I mean a coach of a women's team. So yeah, I mean, I would say that I would be pretty upset if and pretty surprised if the women's team wasn't like in the top three teams at the next World Cup, with a decent chance of winning. I just don't think we're going to go into World Cups anymore. Like it's such a favorite that it's like almost a foregone conclusion that we're going to win the World Cup. I just feel like there's too much talent and like
Which is a good
it,
thing, by the way. It's good.
I think
It's
it is a good thing. Yeah. Well,
competition's
it's
good.
also nice, just dominating, but yeah, it's a good thing for soccer. I mean,
Well, that's the problem with the because I know a lot of American fans. They love the women's team because when the World Cup rolls around, they just blow the doors off everyone, and they enjoy that, and I enjoy that. But
yeah.
I think it's better for the game that there's going to be a little more equilibrium at the top, and we'll see how that goes. But Emma Hayes is a knockout as of that was universally approved as the coach. So I think it's a big job, but they'll obviously I think they're well equipped for it.
I would also add, having met a lot of the women and almost all of the men on our respective national teams, like these are some really cool people. I mean, I've been around a lot of athletes in different sports, and I can't remember just. I don't know if we're just getting lucky or what, but it's this. They're just so. I mean, there's no arrogance. There's no ego. I mean, I shouldn't say none. I'm sure if I was the coach, I would probably maybe take it differently. But when I mean, like I said, just meeting a lot of athletes throughout my life, it's really impressive on both sides. Really impressive people, and people that
Bottom,
you like proud of, as an American, to be representing your country.
That's awesome to hear. And I do feel like, because I love working in soccer circles because people are very grounded and they're real. You can have normal conversations. They remember your name. And I worked at ESPN. I dealt with a lot of athletes, and I love athletes of all sides. But I found out that like combat sports and soccer, they were like the most grounded. I really enjoyed the conversations. My final question for you, Brett, and with being on Netflix, and we've mentioned F1 and Drive to Survive and the success they've had with their Netflix show, and you also mentioned how great these American soccer athletes are. I mean, how do we bring that? I mean, whether it's a show like that, I know MLS has mentioned that's something they're trying to do. And I know that might, I don't know how far along they are, but getting these athletes out, which is certainly something you can help with in the public eye to show them how great they are. And could that be a hook for people to enjoy this
I
sport a little
am
bit more?
100% on the same page with you, and don't want to like get into too specifics, but there's definitely it's on everybody's radar. All of those opportunities, like for sure. Honestly, anything you can come up with now is on U.S. Soccer's radar. They are implementing a lot of new things and executing on a lot of things, and I don't know like what I'm if I don't know what I'm supposed to say or
Well,
not to say, I'll just default to the not say anything. But
but
I can tell you that
they're
these
looking.
people are like on top of yeah, because I mentioned a lot of things. and especially at JT. And I was thinking that maybe he hadn't considered this before, or that it hadn't been brought to his attention. And like, most of them had been thoroughly considered and are either dismissed because of good reasons or are likely to be implemented. And that includes everything that you just said.
Okay. If you need an
That's a, I know
executive,
it's a broad answer, but
okay, no, I can read between the lines just because it would have been a non-starter if you said no, they're not looking. But the fact, just the simple idea that they're listening is, I think, music to ears of a lot of people. And if you need an executive producer for any projects, I am available. I'll drop you a note later on. But Brett, this was fantastic, and I appreciate you carving out a little time. I know you have a lot on your plate with U.S. soccer and so many things. But thanks for chatting with me here on in the business end of the Soccer OG.
the soccer OG, man, I love it. It's a pleasure.
Oh, what a guy, Brett.